Well, it looks like the all boys club has been broken, at least a little bit. There are now female custodies, or at least singular female custody. Essentially, in a new bit of Custodies lore, and the Custodies are not Space Marines really, their process is slightly different. There's a story, and it has a female custody. In fact, I shall now read to you what it says. This is from a recent codex. Custodian, oh god. Dear Games Workshop, you don't need to make names this hard to pronounce. Calades Terravolia, Kesh, of course there's a third part, stood upon the bridge of the Cobra-class destroyer named Vigilant Flame. The warship belonged to the mighty Battlefleet Solar. She lingered in the shadows at the back of the bridge, positioned at the spot where she could observe the actions of every crew member, be they instrumentation pits at the armament shrines, or, in the case of Shipmaster Lethwick, stood ramrod straight before his command throne. If all of Kesh's plans came to fruition in just over 3 Terran Standard Hours, she would deposit a compact cyclonic warhead upon the polished floor of the Emperor's throne room. In theory, it would then detonate, annihilating the companions and the Master of Mankind in a single apocalyptic detonation. So, that is... There were people debating whether or not the initial she was referring to the ship. Ships are often referred to in female sense. No, it is clearly the Custodian, and if you're wondering why she would be blowing up the Emperor, the Custodians do this thing where they do the blood games, which is trying to destroy the Emperor and the throne room, but you're the good guy, so you're not really going to do it, and that helps you find weaknesses in your own system. Again, Warhammer's very silly and over the top. So, unequivocally, there is a female Custodian, which again is not the same process as a Space Marine. It's different, and they're arguably way more powerful. Go ask Henry Cavill. So, what does this mean? Well, there's been a long-standing beef within the Warhammer community about whether or not female Space Marines are a thing, can be a thing, or should be a thing. And really, it's all down to preference, but at this point, both sides have dug in so far and traded so many personal insults and annoyed each other so much. It's really more about the person you don't like at work, their favorite sports team winning the Super Bowl, or the actor they won't shut up about getting an Oscar or a Golden Globe. It's not really about the lore, it's about how annoying the other side of some type of fandom faction will react to something. I actually think this is a potentially really clever way to skirt the female Space Marine issue. People who want female Space Marines have said for a long time, hey, I just want more female representation, and we don't count Sisters of Battle as being as cool as Space Marines, which is dumb because they're cooler, but whatever. Okay, well, you don't get Space Marines, but you get the people who are better than Space Marines. It would be like if Star Wars said that there were female clone commandos, but not regular clones. You get female representation in a smaller, more elite group, so you don't largely change the fighting force, you don't have to change the lore that much. Status quo mostly stays the same, but you've appeased the pain point that a particular group has had with the whole setting and lore. Because, as a lot of people will tell you, if you make the Space Marines diverse in their gender, then the Sisters of Battle stop being as unique. And Games Workshop already isn't giving them enough lore and interesting stories. I don't want to give them more excuses to ignore the cooler elements of this. Of course, it's also worth noting that there's the Sisters of Silence within Custodian forces, which are not Custodians necessarily, who have been in the lore for ages, like as long as I've been playing Warhammer. So this is kind of more of a gradual step. And I know people who say, oh, it's political. It's Games Workshop wants to sell plastic. And the reason they haven't done female Space Marines in the past is because it wouldn't sell plastic. By whatever metrics they used, they came to that conclusion. Because if they thought it would sell plastic, nearly 40 years ago, they would have added it in. Maybe their metrics are saying that now there's a lot of demand for it, so maybe they should try it. It isn't political, it's economical. And I know that's upsetting because everyone wants to believe that their opinions are morally sound and, in an ironic twist of fate, almost divine. but they aren't. They're just a personal preference, and that's just the way things are. So, what does this mean? Well, if it's new lore, like with the Primaris Space Marines that happened a while back, people didn't love the Primaris Space Marines at first. There's still sometimes a point of contention, but overall, most people agree that the new sculpts look really cool and the lore didn't change that much. And it's just a minor progression of the lore. If you go back prior to the creation of the Space Marines getting Primaris, and you only play Horus Heresy or stuff set prior to that moment, or even some factions that just didn't like the Primaris Space Marines at first, you don't even have to acknowledge that they exist. In fact, there's canonical in-universe examples of Space Marine chapters not liking Primaris. If they were to introduce female Space Marines or just female Custodians, what have you, there's going to be in-universe explanations for it. There's going to be in-universe people who don't like it that you can choose to play as, that fits your gameplay style. And if you're doing gameplay or stories, narrative games and such set before this change, well, then it doesn't impact you at all. It's not the end of the world. And like in most things Warhammer, the world is so vast that if you don't like something, you can just choose to ignore it, and it doesn't even break canon for your faction to not know about this thing. The Dark Angels won't know about this. Chaos Space Marines won't know about this. The Tau won't know about this. They've had women in their fighting forces the whole time. There's women all in the Guard. There's the idea that there aren't enough women in Warhammer as a setting is ridiculous. The idea there's not enough women in Warhammer as like players, well, that one's probably kind of valid, honestly. It's kind of a sausage fest. But the whole only boys can have the Emperor's seed thing has become a bit of a meme. Really, I'm the story guy. So for me, if they can tell a compelling story and it's a reasonable explanation for how things happen, it doesn't bother me. If they just slap it on and they don't explain it, like the Star Wars sequels that just kind of haphazardly added new information but never really fleshed anything out, that sucks. That's really annoying. But it's early days, so we don't know. And again, this could all be for nothing. It could turn out that everything is fine and nothing has actually changed in the lore at all. And this is just a mistranslation, or they're classifying Sisters of Silence and blanks as Custodians proper. I don't know. It's hard to say. There's a whole bunch of writers at Games Workshop's writing team. They don't always all agree on things anyway. And there's so many books and video games and everything else to enjoy. If you don't like everything from like the year 45,000 forward, just enjoy the previous 45,000 years of stories. It's really not that hard.